Our story begins with the curse. Once it appeared, it quickly started changing the world, eroding it, taking away from everything benevolent, until only the worst remained, something that is always kept to the shadows. We came up with our gang of outcasts and based game mechanics on that. You can see that even by looking at our intro, it was made for our very first Steam Early Access build that came out back in April 2019. That intro includes every main character, including those that became playable much later, like Buck and Magnus. Once we had our visuals down, we began our work on unique mechanics for each character. Of course, they weren't entirely based on characters' looks, but we couldn't make Buck play like an agile warrior, for example. But we didn't want to make him just a dumb brute either, even if he is big and strong. So we gave him an animal companion, Charon. It's the only case where mechanics came first and visuals were made afterwards. The rest was made the other way around. If you look closely at the intro, you can see that the Outcasts gang consists of 5 members, but there are only 4 of them in the game. That's because our 5th character has certain traits that make them unfit for the story about the Ashe Curse. But we hope to release DLC with this character so that players will be able to see our world from a new perspective and dive more deeply into side stories that previously were only touched upon. Unlike most collectible card games, getting new cards in Deck of Ashes is an involved process. You don't just find them, you find recipes. And then you have to use a special resource, Ashe, to turn recipes into playable cards that will be added to your deck. We did it for a reason, because Deck of Ashes isn't just a collectible card game, it's a hardcore collectible card game. We had to make the process more complex so that players would feel that every new card is an achievement, a reward for their hard work. So besides finding a new recipe, you have to accumulate enough Ashe and then make it back to the camp to actually create a new card. You can't easily remove cards from your deck either. First, you have to unlock the option itself by spending resources, and then pay the smith to actually do it. We wanted players to really think about their deck and card synergy instead of just adding more and more cards. You can think of it as our way of punishing players for making a mistake, since our world is harsh and unforgiving. You really should plan ahead and think of a strategy before crafting new cards.
Try my patience.
We have an additional mode in our game called Badlands. It was introduced because our community asked for an easy way to experiment with mechanics, particular cards, and their synergies. So in Badlands, certain aspects were softened. For example, instead of recipes, you'll be looting actual cards, so you can try out new builds with less hassle. It's commonplace for collectible card games that your starting cards turn into deadweight by mid to late game, so players discard them. It didn't fit our game because you have to spend considerable amount of resources to remove a card, so we came up with an idea of upgrading starting cards, not by simply making them more damaging, but by adding additional mechanics. So a simple strike would turn into a strike that also causes bleeding or a stun, and so on. We decided against letting players upgrade their rare and epic cards. There were multiple reasons for that. First, it would be very expensive, and players were already complaining that resources are too scarce. Also, an epic card is called epic for a reason. It's already powerful and rare, so if you could upgrade it, it might completely break the balance. There's a mechanic related to the Ashe. The cards that you play during combat don't just go into the graveyard and get shuffled back into the main deck afterwards. In our game, cards go into Deck of Ashes and stay there until you bring them back using other cards. So we've come up with a special type of cards that have an effect only when they are in that Deck of Ashes. Initially, these cards allowed for some very powerful builds. For example, Pyromancer could wreck any boss in a turn or two with just the damage from her Ashe cards. So we nerfed it pretty hard. It's still playable, but requires more skill to manage. Overall, now Ashe Cards aren't meant for a build of their own. It's an addition to their other builds.
Нормальным архетипом.
We're overjoyed that version 1.0 has finally been released. It took us more than 2.5 years to create Deck of Ashes. In our full release version, there's a lot of new content. For example, we've added a 4th character with his own unique mechanics. Now our players will be able to see the epilogue, which opens up after you complete the campaign with each of the 4 characters. Also, thanks to our publisher, we were able to add Russian voiceover, and we think it sounds great. So, we're happy about how the game turned out. It has integrity, the story is cohesive and complete, and you can spend many hours trying out new combinations of cards.
Как новый опыт.
It was a real experience for me, with the amount of new people and new opinions we've been getting. There are many new voices and new thoughts about the direction our game should take, and that gives us some really interesting ideas.
Для размышлений.
Наша комьюнити очень просит.
We've been asked for a console version of our game, and we're currently investigating the technical aspect of things, and I hope we will be able to figure it out and offer Deck of Ashes on consoles as well. Also, I want to remind our fans that there's a design contest underway. Send us your design for a mini-boss, and it may end up in our game with its own mechanics. These monsters will be added in a free content patch later this year. Winners of our contest will also get a hand-painted statue of Genetrix. For the details, join us on social networks and Steam.
Наши страницы в Steam. Играйте в Deck of Ashes, peace.